I'm real happy today to get Mark Johnson back with us. Mark, of course, from LinkUp Communications, and he has really, along with his wife Karen, been a source of a lot of information to help us navigate what's going on here, whether you need filters or not filters, whether you need to register or not register, whether you need to throw your hands up in the air and say, my goodness, this is all crazy. And so we have not only the C-band issue, but of course the 5G, but we still have the repack material and such going on. So, Mark, we're just happy to have you with us today.
Man, I'm glad to be here. I tell you, it has been a busy couple of months since November. Last week was outstanding. Gives me great hope for the NAB. Karen and Clay and I were at the NRB convention last week in Nashville. I would say the exhibit floor was maybe as much as a third increase in the number of exhibitors that we've seen in the previous years, and it was wall to wall. People are ready to get back at it. They're ready to talk about broadcasting, and it was very, very exciting and gives me a lot of encouragement for the NAB. So, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you. I see a bunch of old friends on the screens that have joined us, and I look forward to seeing them as travel pops up again. But if you'd like, Barry, I'll jump right on in, and we'll start talking first about 5G. So let me get to that and put this on. Where's my play? There we go. All right. You see that all right?
Very good.
Okay. All right. Super. Okay. So let's talk about the 5G transition that Barry was just alluding to. And as you all know, that LinkUp has been in this from the get-go. Several meetings at the FCC back in 2018. We were close to Intelsat, SES, Eutelsat, and Telsat all along this process. So here's the current status of the transition. So effective December of last year, everybody who is in a top 46 market needed a filter. The good news for radio broadcasters was that SES and Intelsat both were able to go ahead and move all of their radio transponder traffic up above where the blue filter cuts off for transponder 17 around there. And they were able to go ahead and move all of those up. So if you're in the top 46 market, you should have a blue filter on a downlink that picks up radio content from NPR or Premier, Westwood, our new facility, any of those folks, Learfield, that should all have a blue filter on it. Television broadcaster in the top 46 market should have a red filter. Why the red filter? Because the first step of this is that the satellite companies gave away 120 megahertz of the ultimate 300 megahertz that the folks would have, but they told them they could give 120 meg in the top 46 markets. So how did they do that? What they did was they set up basically a two-stage process of moving television transponder traffic to up above transponder 7. So right now there's a lot of TV traffic between 16 and 7 that ultimately is going to have to move by December of 2023. So what they're doing to move that is they're putting in those red filters. So that is supposed to block all of that 5G traffic below 3.82 gigahertz. There are 7 satellite launches coming. With those 7 satellite launches domestically, SES and Intelsat will be able to move that traffic up above 4 gigahertz. Once they do that, the TV stations will have another visit in the top 46 markets, where someone will come in and replace the red filter with a blue filter. The beauty is, if you've already got the blue filter at a radio station, you're set for the ultimate, which is the 300 megahertz that they're going to wind up giving them on December 2023. So blue filters nationwide by 2023. Right now, there's a pretty good supply of filters. I would encourage you to go ahead and get it done this year, because next year is going to be twice as busy as 2021 was, because in addition to having to go back to all those cable head ends and all of those TV stations to put in a blue filter, replacing a red filter, they're also going to start in the other markets outside the top 46. So my belief is that blue filters will be twice as popular, so to speak, as far as delivery and installation in 2023 as they were in 2021. So it's a good time right now. If you're a radio station and you're outside the top 46 markets and you don't have a filter yet, go ahead and get that done. Now's the time. So what I'd like to show you is what happens when 5G hits an antenna where the filter's not. This was actually a red filter, but it wasn't installed correctly, and we got a call. But that's what 5G looks like right there. And in C-band, the reason that's to the right, even though it's below us on the spectrum, is that the L&B inverts everything. So what you see on the left are actually the higher downlink frequencies. What you see on the right is that 3820 and below. But I'll just let you see it one more time, and you can just see how much traffic there is on that. Hold on, let me go back to that. So let's see if we can get that to go. So there you go. So that's what 5G looks like coming into your dish. So you can see why the filter is so critical. And we did a lot of that. We've got a very experienced team of installers. We probably did, good gracious, probably 50 or 60 new C-band downlinks in last year, and probably a couple of hundred, maybe as many as 300 5G filters last year. And we work with all of the owners, SES, Intelsat, Telsat, and Eutelsat. So we have a tremendous amount of experience in the field with these installations from 5G to uplinks and downlinks. The big news we have is in November, we purchased our competition, Orbital Media Networks. Some of you may be familiar with them. They have distributed USRN in the past. They've distributed and we've taken that over. They do some Learfield properties and Dakota News Network, North Carolina News Network, Mississippi, TelSouth, that news network. So it was a wonderful acquisition for us. It gives us a ton of new potential new opportunities, new resources, gives us greater 24/7 live technical support, something we've tried to do from the get-go. The staff there is really good, and we were able to keep all the knock operators and the engineer. So we have trained technicians on staff, and then we have other folks for tier 2 support from our most experienced techs that are on call. We can do uplink service to multiple satellites, SES-11, SES-2, SES-3, and we've got quality transmission equipment. Backup power is amazing there, and a ton of internet capacity. If you don't know the history of this facility, but let me give you a little quick history on this. Bill Setmeyer built a group called National Supervisory Network, and he had a facility out in Colorado. And when he sold the property to Clear Channel, they started looking for the right place they wanted to be. And Clear Channel actually built this facility out of what used to be a AT&T central office. So this place is just, got tons of fiber coming into the building, tons of backup power. Clear Channel did a really good job building this place. Orbital Media Networks bought it from them, I think, about 7 years ago, and they've operated it ever since. And we took over the assets of Orbital Media Network, which include this facility, as well as about 40 customers that we're developing new relationships with. And it's all very exciting, and we can do tons more with that facility than with the smaller facility that we had before. But this is just continuing to grow. We've added 10 new employees, taking us to a staff of 18. You can see a look at, some of the uplinks to monitoring facility there, where we monitor the transponders, the receivers, products that we put up for customers. We're looking at, and this was one of the big things that really jumped out at the NRB, is our operators are there looking at satellites and the equipment, and they've got a fair amount of bandwidth as far as what they're capable of adding. And one of the things that customers at the NRB really indicated that they wanted us to add was monitoring services. So, we can use this as a network operations center for a customer who owns, 20, 40, 100, 200 stations. We can put in the ability to be that first point of contact that monitors their tower lights, their transmitter power, the temperature in the room, all of the things that would need to be monitored by the customer, including taking recording the EAS alerts that come in when their sites are unmanned, and making sure that gets back to them immediately so that it can be kept on site as required by the FCC. But so that's the next product we're going to add to this facility in Colorado. And if you have a few minutes, Barry, one of the things I'd like to do is, I did a little presentation on content distribution last week for Larry Wilkins' group at the ABA, and I think it'd be something that everybody would enjoy, and I'd like to take us about 10 or 15 minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do is just kind of review what content distribution is, because content distribution for a broadcaster is a lot different than streaming an audio channel to a CDN. So, at the end of this presentation, want people to understand the options and the cost versus performance, and then understand that there's no such thing as a free technology, and no technology is perfect. Some are better, more perfect than others, and some are less expensive than others, but none are free and none are perfect. So just a quick history of how we got here, and a lot of us on this call will remember, that AT&T was our content distribution system for, gee whiz, over 50 years in the broadcast industry. They began by doing broadcast lines between Washington and Philadelphia and New York, when they learned that they could put, coils in a system and cut down on the loss across copper. And then in the 30s and 40s, they got into coaxial and then ultimately microwave. And AT&T was able to deliver the news from radio stations across the country so that, people could hear about Pearl Harbor. They could hear Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats, and AT&T really built that system. And that nationwide delivery began in the 30s. And then in the 50s, they figured out how to increase the capability so that they could do video. Until 1983, network radio was almost the exclusive preview of AT&T, and that's kind of when the satellite delivery started. 1979, NPR and Mutual just began building out satellite delivery networks. And like I said, December of 83 is when everybody else got on board. In fact, that was my first downlink installation, was December 1983. Chief engineer was busy building a new FM on with a 1,000-foot stick. And they handed me a box and said, "Hey kid, make this work. And oh, by the way, it's got to be ready by midnight on December 31st. I said, "Yeah, I think I've seen one of these. I saw Charlie Wooten put one up, but this will be my first shot." So that's kind of where we started. So today in the 21st century, we've got C-band, we've got Ku-band. The military, for the most part, it handles Ka-band. There's some SNG news gathering on Ka-band. And then there's IP over satellite, so the two-way IP. And that's where we're at with satellite technology. And the typical satellite content delivery that we're all used to today, it really comes in two flavors. We can do it directly from the studio by putting in an uplink, or we can do it as a backhaul, where you backhaul using anything from transport stream over IP to, up till now, we've been doing T1s, but as we all know, AT&T and Verizon and all those folks want to get rid of their T1s. So we have to look at other ways to get back to a teleport and have the teleport uplink it. And then you can have a downlink like, we all had at studios, and multiple downlinks so we can see multiple satellites. So what are the pros and cons? Well, it's cost versus reliability, as it is with any product. So cost is probably a lot less than what many people expect it to be, because a lot of people think in terms of television, where you're doing 8-9 megabits, but in radio, it can range anywhere from, you're doing your own uplinking and all you need is a channel on a satellite for 128 kilobits and you're $1,400 a month, to you need a full array of services at a teleport, and maybe that goes to $5,000 or $6,000 a month. So there's a range there based on services. The reliability, well, that's based on whether you're C-band or Ku-band, truly. And typically the IP over satellite is almost always Ku-band. But your reliability in C-band, and this is what NPR has preached for 30 years, is your reliability is 4 nines, 99.99% reliable. And in fact, one of the things that satellite companies will do that you're never going to get from an internet company is they'll do a link budget estimate with availability. And if you lose as much as 15 minutes at a time, they will credit your account for that lost time. You're never going to see an ISP do that. So there's, the cost of C or KU band is going to be more than, doing something over the internet, but it's also going to be a higher reliability than doing something over the internet, unless you look at ways to make the internet more reliable. We'll get to that in just a second. So backhaul distribution of content really changed around turn of the century with the audio over IP solution. So that's where we started to get the Barracks boxes, the Comrex boxes, the Telos boxes. So now we've got the ability to digitize audio and send it over the World Wide Web, have it addressed to a particular IP location where a decoder is, and so a codec to a decoder, and you've got backhaul. Great thing is the operation of it's extremely inexpensive, because you've probably already got the internet there, and it's flexible. You can take that, move it from here to there, and use the same electronics at, let's say, every football stadium where you're going to broadcast back from, or every basketball stadium. So instead of having to have equalized lines or having to have a satellite facility at every location like Jeffrey Sudikoff built in the 80s, you can just take a small box, a Telos box, a Comrex box, or a Barracks box, and off you go. So great for point-to-point distribution. It early on, using it for content distribution involved a lot of bandwidth, because sending it to a cloud and having it distribute was not something they were into just yet. So when people were doing audio, it was IP address to IP address. So each additional location increased your bandwidth. And typically audio over IP at this time is just RTP, UDP, right? So it's going from point to point through the World Wide Web, and there's no, in RDP, UDP, there's no, there's no correction for packet loss, delay, bandwidth changes. It's just, it either all gets there or it has drops. And as long as it's all getting there, it's beautiful, because it's digital audio. But the RTP UDP has that shortcoming of not being able to correct for lost packets. You can do the same thing, and today sending it to a cloud and going to multiple sites, which is an addition since the beginning of the technology. So what are the pros? Obviously, it's cheaper, it's accessible. You can do it anywhere that there's internet. What are the cons? Oftentimes it has issues negotiating through firewalls. It has packet loss, jitter, latency, fluctuating bandwidth, and a lack of security. We all remember the stories where somebody had decided to use a codec to feed to their transmitter site, and in the middle of the night, some hacker found the IP address and took it over. So security was a big issue with that technology in the beginning. And the bandwidth limitations introduced by network congestion can control when using the TCP protocol in RTMP. Packet loss when sending UDP based on low latency MPEG transport streams over the public internet. So that gets us to where we're at in the since 2010, and it's even gotten better in the last couple of years. But we started the idea of transport stream over IP. So instead of just sending an audio stream, now we can send a transport stream. So if you're delivering content to radio stations you own or affiliates, you can send them more than just the audio. Now you can include the entire transport stream. You can provide multiple audio channels with a PID for each channel. You can include relay commands, RDS data, file delivery, whatever you can put into a DVB transport stream, you can feed it over IP, and that IP can go internet or it can go satellite. So what really made transport stream over IP practical was statistical multiplexing. So statistical multiplexing is just that ability to get content and decide which content is the most important, and using the bandwidth that's available in the most efficient way. And so statistical multiplexing is really the kind of the unsung hero of delivering transport stream over IP. The other thing you can do with transport stream over IP is you can add secure, reliable transport. So SRT and the SRT Alliance is an open source software, and the SRT gives to transport stream over IP what we lacked in audio over IP. We have the ability with SRT to adapt the signal based on the conditions of the internet from point to multipoint or point to point. And SRT, it actually works on both sides of this equation. So you've got a MUX, you're feeding transport stream to the cloud. You can have SRT between the MUX and the cloud. And what SRT does is SRT will it will constantly monitor that signal from the cloud back to the gateway, and it will say, oh, I dropped a packet. Oh, I've got some jitter, I've got some delay, there's a bandwidth change, and it will adjust the transport stream and delivery within half a second, and basically make the internet more reliable. Then it has the ability from the cloud to the destination to do the same thing. So you wind up with SRT on both the contribution side and the delivery side. And so it's an open source audio video transport protocol. It was devised by Haivision for the delivery of video, and Haivision took it and put it in the open source, and now there's an SRT alliance of about 600 companies that make improvements to SRT, use it, to make delivery of their content better. And one of the things it does is it's very secure. It changes those unpredictable networks, helps traverse firewalls, and basically brings the best of live audio and video, even in some of the worst networks. So, accounting for jitter and delay and fluctuating bandwidth and maintaining the integrity of the video or the audio. So it's end-to-end security, resiliency, dynamic endpoint adjustment based on the conditions to deliver that audio across any network. One of the some of the key features, AES 128 256-bit encryption. It's got packet loss recovery through low latency retransmission techniques, video and audio streaming timing recovery. That helps for the delays. Ability to designate any endpoint as a sender or receiver or rendezvous mode. And it detects network performance between endpoints, looking for packet loss, latency, and jitter. And so what are the pros and cons? Well, the pros are transport stream over IP. You can, the same things that you can do with transport stream over satellite, you can do with transport stream over IP. You know, the costs are very competitive. The availability is really anywhere that you've got a network. But the key is working with an equipment manufacturer or a software manufacturer or both who is a member of the SRT Alliance. And what we think with SRT and transport stream is that it makes the best yet backup to satellite distribution. So we go back to the original idea of, you know, nothing's free and nothing's perfect, but the closest thing to perfect is a combo satellite internet solution using SRT and delivering a transport stream over satellite and over IP together. And remember, it's not internet radio. It is a professional broadcast transmission, whether it's video or audio. And it gives you the opportunity to reach beyond the satellite footprint. Let's say your satellite footprint is CONUS, and you wind up with a station in the Caribbean, or a station in Hawaii, or a station in you know, Europe. They can all get the same content, the same store and forward files, the same store and forward triggers, the same RDS, everything. So basically, you know, if you're KU band, you know, you really only have two regular outages: sun outage and rain outage. Well, you know, transport stream over internet can fix that. It can also recover a damaged antenna or a lost LNB, and you know, that is as close to perfect and cost efficient of technology as I think, you know, we'll find today. So appreciate the time, and anybody has any questions about 5G or
well, Mark, we appreciate the information, and a couple of questions have come up. One here has already popped up in the chat box, having to do with moving a dish.
Mm-hmm.
A registered dish was whacked by a tornado,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to move it and see if that registration will transfer, or if it seems to me you can't register a dish right now.
No, you cannot register a dish, but I would think replacement of a damaged dish, because it's really it's the site that's registered, and as long as you're, you know, replacing it with the same size, I don't think there would be a problem. But I tell you what, we do know a couple of people who might know the answer to that. So is that
Greg, do you want to speak up?
Greg,
add to it?
Yeah, that's Greg. So yeah, if Greg wants to send me an email, I'll get him in touch with a couple of folks who can probably get us the right answer. Can you tell me, Greg, if that's on if that's on an SES satellite? Because if it is, I'll reach out to Bronnie Fisher, who's in charge of the 5G transition. So
We have a link here in chat from Sherrod Monday that the
Yep.
FCC just released regarding updates to these registrations. Sherrod, can you tell us quickly what it is?
I was just browsing for a question or to see if I could find a quick answer to Greg's question there, and happened across the FCC's notice that basically just goes through and clears out some of the old data of sites that were formerly registered but not cleared out of the database on the IBFS. So it's just basically saying we've updated the list there. It doesn't have a direct answer to whether you can move. I would agree with Mark on this one as to whether or not you can relocate a dish. My hunch is that the FCC is going to treat that relocation effectively as a new site registration. And I'm not sure that that is allowed at the moment. But if you were just replacing an existing dish, same place, even if you use the same model, you should be able to drop it in. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is if you replace the dish with an identical model dish in the same place, you don't need to worry about anything with the FCC.
Right.
If you do want to replace that antenna with a different antenna than what's registered in the same place, that would require a minor mod, which shouldn't be disallowed.
Right.
But other than that, I think Mark's probably better to handle some of the questions on whether or not any new sites are available at this point.
Well, and that's right. And the fact that because, you know, if you come in and replace an old dish, which SES and Intelsat are doing as part of this transition, there's some, you know, the idea is that making them whole. So when SES or Intelsat comes in and replaces an antenna at the same location, it doesn't negate the registration. So I would think, you know, Greg would be in the same position as they are, as long as it wasn't a move, you know, from those coordinates, and it wasn't a drastic change, you know, like, okay, well, I'm going to go to a 4.5 now instead of a 3.7, or I'm going to go to a 2.4 instead of a 3.7. So, but let's, you know.
Well, in his particular case, he's talking about moving it from a transmitter site to a studio, apparently.
Moving the replacement. Oh yeah. Well, that location change would negate it.
Yeah.
So
if you want the registration, if you want the protection, if you registered it to guarantee protection against interference from 5G, I would strongly recommend that you not try to move it if you can afford it for any technical reason, because once you let that registration go, you may not be able to get a new site registered for protection. So definitely don't give up what you've already got. You might, might want to explore it from that angle. Is a cat in the hand, what is it? A bird in the hand is worth better than two in the bush or something?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the question, I guess, becomes, will there ever be a new registration period? Or no, you're shaking your head. What about people? Now, I'll take an example here, and you can tell me what, if anything, you think about it. Native American station out in the middle of a reservation. They're not registered.
Right.
So there is a cell phone tower on the same point as their transmitter, and maybe a mile from where their dish is.
Well,
what would you recommend?
Well, let's think about this for a second, because the 5G that's in the mid band is not likely to be mounted on a tower site in the middle of nowhere, because its maximum
coverage area,
transmission coverage, is about 2,000 feet. So, you know, not likely that somewhere they're going to put a 5G radiator. So, I mean, to me, I would put a filter on it, and you know, let that suffice. You know, because what we see here in Panama City, because of Hurricane Michael, we got lumped in with the top 46 markets, and basically, you know, all the 5G radiators are about 25 feet off the ground, sitting on what looks like a telephone pole, and in some cases on a telephone pole. And you know, they got to run fiber to that because of the kind of bandwidth, you know, when you're ultimately going to be doing 300 megabits or probably even greater than that, but at 300 megahertz, you know, you're going to have fiber going to that location. So unless they're running fiber out to that tower site, they wouldn't even have enough, you know, ability to get there. And the question is, what would they do when they got 2,000 feet away from the tower?
You're still out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Good. Okay. John, you've got a question here.
Yes, I'm involved with a non-commercial educational group that was did the window last November, and we were planning on using satellite downlink programming. If there are no future registrations, then what do we do about protection?
Well, it goes back to a similar thing. You know, are you in a large market?
No.
Then yeah.
No, it's in a rural area in the high plains.
Well, you know,
outside of a top 46 TV.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at the cost of what it would take for Verizon or AT&T to get 5G every 2,000 feet from a population center to where you're going to be. And, you know, if it's not going to get there, I don't think it's something you need to worry about as far as the registration, because you're not going to get that. But you can, you know, you can put a filter on it. I mean, the filters have gone up a little bit. They're a little over $400 now, but you know, basically you can get a filter for, you know, around $400 and put it on there. And if somebody gets within, you know, 1,500 to 2,000 feet, you know, you're still probably going to be in good shape. If they get closer than that, then it's really a problem. But with that blue filter, you know, you shouldn't have any trouble with C-band.
Would you recommend that the station contact the cell company and ask them to install the filter?
You can't hurt. All I can say is no.
It'd be the flip side of the LTE, if you think about it, where cell companies came and told the radio stations, you got to filter yourself for us.
Well, in a sense, we've seen some of that already, where they jumped ahead of SES and Intelsat and went ahead and filtered at a location that they were at. So we've actually seen them, and they've even contacted us about putting it in some cases.
And really, $400 is not a heck of a lot when you get down to it. Sherrod makes a very important point that filtering is absolutely a must for many reasons, not just the 5G.
Right. But, and remember that 5G filter, that alga filter, or the microwave filter company one, which I actually think is a little better, but those are the two best. They also provide the radar altimeter filtering on the high end above 4.2. So you just can't go wrong at this point if you've got a C-band downlink putting a 5G filter on it.
Would you think that if somebody had a cell phone that had 5G and they came in close to a dish, would that be a problem? Or would it be that it wouldn't be transmitting 5G because there's no 5G to be transmitted to?
That's, you know, and a lot of phones right now say 5G, and it's really not.
Yeah, it's more 4G LTE.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm not as worried about the handheld side as the handheld device as I am that transmitter on a pole that's 70 dB above the noise floor.
Right.
That's the one that bothers me.
Alan Sherrill has a good question here about the timeline for 5G beyond the top 46 markets.
Well, they're not supposed to start until after December of 2023, because that's when you have to have a blue filter on everywhere. So theoretically, outside of the top 46, it should not happen before December 2023. The one thing, Alan, is that, and this is a thing that they didn't talk a lot about, FCC didn't talk a lot about, when we talk about the mid-band and 5G filters and all that, we're really thinking about that 3.7 to 4.0, right? That 3.7 to 4.0 that's in our band. But actually they're getting 3.5 to 3.7. And theoretically, they can start that up anytime into a market. Once again, back to my idea of go ahead and get filtered now, because that will still be, 70 dB of attenuation of the 3.5 to 3.7 if they, if they go ahead and jump into a market. And Alan's in North Carolina. So, there are some markets that are just beyond that top 46, which might, start getting 3.5 to 3.7 in the next couple of years. And, but as long as you've got that filter on it, back to Sherrod's point, a filter's a must. Even if they don't start the 3.7 to 4 until after December 2023, they could start the 3.5 to 3.7 in a decent sized market pretty much any time.
Yeah. And in any case, if anyone has a question, they are certainly invited to call you or Karen and
Yep.
prompt answer.
Well, or Clay or Doug Watson, anybody on our team is well versed in the 5G. And if you've got our email, and typically our emails are Mark at linkupcommunications.com or Karen at linkupcommunications.com, Doug at link, so call us or email us if you have a question, have a thought, if you need a contact who, like we told Greg, maybe knows more specifics about replacing a dish. We'll surely get you in touch with whoever those people are.
Yep. And you can find the banner for LinkUp Communications on our front page. If you just go down here a little bit below me, it's there. And it's also on the front page there under manufacturers and vendors. You'll find them there, and you can check out their site, get their phone number, get their email addresses, and certainly find some security of any question you might have.
And come by and see us at the NAB. We'll be in the West Hall.
Yep. Question is still open about NAB population this year.
Well, I saw somebody had posted that NRB, actually had about 500 people extra register immediately on site. And so it went to 4,000, and that's why it seemed so populated, and that was a good thing. So I'm hoping the same for NAB, and I do look forward to seeing everybody, and I thank everybody for your time today.
Well, thank you, Mark, and again, hope that you'll come back to us periodically with an update and let us know what's going on, not just with 5G, but with are you gonna call it O&M, or are you gonna rebrand it as part of LinkUp?
No, everything's LinkUp. It's LinkUp. We're all one happy family.
Okay, well, excellent. And we'll look forward to hearing more about what you guys are doing.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Barry. Thanks for your time.
All right. Question mark for John, you got your hand up. You got something you want to add?
Oh, actually, I was clapping, but I did send a private message, but I might as well throw it out to the whole group. On this new station build I might be involved with, if you're going to use metal fence for C-band shielding, how small would the recommended mesh be? I guess that'd be frequency dependent, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that one since I was typing a response out to you. But basically, think the old C-band dishes that used to be out there before a lot of the current spun or solid aluminum dishes out there. You used to be able to see the C-band mesh dishes And if you think about the weave of those and the screen size, it's microwave, you're talking millimeters here. So you're basically going to be the equivalent of a window screen in terms of the thickness. You might be able to put something up that you could see through, but practically speaking, it might just be better to go ahead and put in place a solid metal wall if you've got it. In some cases, if you have, the thing I didn't mention in the earlier link was like the site which I registered as where I used to work at Sky Angel was actually somewhat depressed. There was the land kind of came up around it, so it was a little bit in a valley. So we had natural terrain shielding, as it's called, plus some buildings around it, which were metal structures, which would have given some additional structure shielding. So there are ways to accomplish some shielding without having to build high wall enclosures. But definitely if you're trying to build something from the ground up that's going to provide that, when you start doing the geometry on it, you find out that it gets pretty tall and pretty far away from the dish and gets pretty impractical by the time you start having a dish in the middle and putting a wall way out around it far enough for look angles. It's technically possible, but if you've got some geographical and building shielding, that's going to be better than trying to fool with a physical shield. But if you absolutely have to have it in one location and you cannot get it registered, then shielding is the only real practical effect you might have or possibility you might have there.
That's kind of what I suspected. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sherrod. Appreciate that. Anyone having problems with DST? Maybe you heard this week that the Senate passed a bill to make daylight saving permanent. I would think the northern tier states wouldn't like that very much. I know the southwestern states don't want it, but there is a movement not to have this backward business going on.
Well, now I guess there's some folks, scientists that are saying sleep that have to do with sleep studies and stuff are saying that standard time would be the better as far as the health of a person. Personally, I like to see the sun as late as it, not go down that early.
Mark, already, go ahead.
Go ahead, Barry. I was just going to mention I saw an article about that the other day and noted that in there they said specifically that they're not going to force states which don't observe DST currently, specifically Hawaii and Arizona. They would not force them to take that on. Of course, that means that we don't have uniformity across the country. It's just allowing everybody who's currently going through change to not have to continue to go through change, but it doesn't enforce a specific time zone on anybody.
Well, I can tell you for a fact, for instance, in Las Vegas, it can be 100 degrees at midnight. I don't know that they want to move the daylight even later than it is.
Well, the original complaints were about the kids. I'm in New England, so we're, early morning is much darker than it was a few days ago. So the kids are waiting for school buses pretty much in the dark. So it doesn't make any sense, since that was one of the reasons for going with daylight saving.
I suppose the question really is, how many would be in favor of standard time that they had for many decades all year round, as opposed to daylight saving time?
There's actually no real one answer, because it depends on where you live. If New York was to have standard time year round, then the sun would come up at 3:30 in the morning in June. On the other hand, if we have it down here in Florida, daylight savings time year round, it would be 9 o'clock in the morning before the sun would come up.
Well, I lived in New York for 22 years. I never saw the sun come up at 3:30 in the morning.
Could you be
Because
exaggerating, Jeff?
No, I wouldn't, because in June in New York on daylight savings time, it comes up at 4:30 in the morning. Back it back down 1 hour, and that's 3:30. That's not an exaggeration.
Okay, I
What
just
about
don't
what
remember
about
it.
daytime AM stations?
I know it happened when I was working in Alaska.
Hey, Barry, what's been your experience there in Arizona? Because you don't change the time.
Yes, that's correct. We had it one year. It was my first year in college, and I was in Flagstaff, and the sunset was 8:35. And one of the crazy things is I had a station owner who carried the Dodgers, and I would get phone calls every 5 minutes after 8 o'clock about not signing off, just in case the Dodgers got another run or something. And he didn't really care about the sunset time. He wanted to stay on till the game was over. But mostly the issue here, as in the northern tier of states, you run out of time for drive-in movies, which don't matter anymore, true. But again, the heat load in the afternoon is pretty high.
Does the heat load matter? Will the heat load matter over 1 hour difference?
Well, I guess that's the question. That's the question of how you feel about it. I'm looking at timeanddate.com. Sunrise in New York, 5:25 a.m. during June. 5:24, 5:25. That's with daylight saving time. The solar noon is just right at 1 o'clock, which is what you would expect on daylight saving time. There's pluses and minuses. If you've got lots of kids and you don't want them in the house, yeah, you probably want the sun. If you, on the other hand, if you want your kids to get to school safely, maybe you don't want the late sun. If you want to have 14, 15 hours of sun a day, I guess maybe it's time to pray to God and ask him to lengthen the day.
No, actually, you can do it even without God. Just move to Alaska.
That's right.
That's true. That's true. I think
Very strange for a New Englander to find bright sunshine at midnight.
Why don't we just go to UTC?
I do remember, oddly enough, we have at least one person here from Alaska that might want to pipe up, but I do remember some years ago I was in Bergen, Norway, and I was reading a newspaper. It had sunset, but it was still light enough to read the newspaper at 3:30 in the morning, just standing on the street. And yes, we know parts of Norway are above the Arctic Circle as parts of Alaska. And yeah, the sun never sets for, I don't know, what, 3 months?
Yeah, that's right. Except if you go back to Bergen, Norway in the winter, boy, that's a whole different.
See,
Hey, Barry, yeah, up here in Alaska, we pretty much are sitting this one out for the debate of, whether we go or not, because it doesn't matter. Our daylight's all over the place in the summer and in night. I'm based in the Anchorage area, and we get about 3 hours of night in the summer, and conversely, in the winter, we get about 3 hours of full daylight, and then we go to a long period of civil twilight at each time. But it's interesting. You head further north, and it's the exact opposite. Up in Utqiagvik, formerly called Barrow, they have 30 days of darkness in the peak of the winter, and then in the summer they have 30 days of sunlight. And the heat. Yeah, somebody asked about the heat loading, and I don't know. The longer hours, the lower the sun is on the horizon, while it's still up in the sky, the bigger the heat load, because you're side loading buildings instead of top down, and people for that matter. It's funny, 70 degrees in Alaska in the summer when the sun's hitting you feels warmer than 80 degrees, 90 degrees down in Florida or in Arizona. Humidity plays a factor in that too, but there are some things to say about when the heat, when people are active and air conditioning is going to be running more and things like that.
Yeah, Mark Johnson, Bill Sepmeyer points out here that 1974 daylight savings time, I guess, were you guys both in Florida still at that time? People hated it in the winter, sunrise at 9 a.m.
Now, is Bill in the chat room?
He is on the YouTube feed right now.
Oh, okay.
And
What I did want to ask was when he sold Supervisory Network, did it shut down the monitoring? Because Mark was talking about restarting it.
I don't believe that was something that Clear Channel went beyond their own stations with, and I know it wasn't part of Orbital's services. I don't know exactly when that service stopped, but obviously with IP capability at transmitter sites, the ability to do what Bill kind of started, really grows. You can do it more places. You can do it, more economically, and now with Nautel adding so many pieces and parts to their GUI, and the remote controls having so many things they can monitor by IP or SNMP, it really takes what Bill's idea was to an even higher level. Kind of the little humorous inside baseball to Karen and I purchasing basically what Bill built decades ago, is that Bill and I were both assistant engineers in Tallahassee, Florida in the early 80s. Bill was the assistant engineer at WFSU TV. I was the assistant engineer at Palmer Communications radio station, WTNT. And Bill and I helped organize the SBE chapter in Tallahassee to start up. So, it's kind of funny, us having this property that he started. It's but this is a small business, and we all see each other around and around again.
Well, I remember talking with Bill before, as he was starting it, and thought it was a great idea. And I recommended it to several of my WOR radio network affiliates. I don't know if they ever signed up, but I was curious. I haven't talked to Bill in a while. Curious whether or not it had continued or stopped. And I know Premier and I Have No Heart has shut down all sorts of things.
Well, the other thing is, the rules have changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
So, the lack of studio requirements in certain markets and things like that.
Bill just made a comment here that I'll read to you, and I noticed that David Stewart said something similar. Bill said, the monitoring IP software capability was acquired by JCOR. We had terminated the service when the FCC deregulated operator on-site rules, though. We had 135 stations under control. So, yeah, I remember when that started, and I think I even wrote about it in Radio World at the time. But yeah, once the walk away unattended situation came into effect, that kind of made it optional. And how many stations want to pay for anything optional? Question mark.
Well, I still think it's a great idea.
Of course it is.
Because as I remember, they would monitor and notify a station if any trend was developing. And, I don't care whether or not you can walk away or not, but, I'd like to know, if I don't have an engineer on duty. I've never worked for a station that didn't have an engineer. I've been in major markets mostly, but, many of my affiliates, both at ABC and at WOR, didn't. They were all contract engineers and less than contract.
Well, there's a dozen or 2 dozen people whose names I see here can tell you that there are so many stations that are not only unmanned, but even if there is someone in the building, they wouldn't know what to do if something happened at the transmitter site.
Right.
Well, and that's what we're trying to bring to this is, trained people with broadcast experience who can, for, the simple things that can be handled by IP, we would do those things, might be, resetting something or, something basic, or, if tower lights are out, reporting that to the FAA for the customer. But I think the big thing comes into what you were just talking about, which is, Rich, that there's, outside of the major markets, so many people are relying on a contract engineer, and he might have 40 or 50 stations under his wing.
Well, and there's all kinds of rely on them to come running if you go off the air, or relying to explain, okay, if the lights go out, you either flip the switch off and forgot it, or the power failed, or there are a lot of things you can be in charge of. If you're going to get into the monitoring, if you could provide an audit trail to your customers, anyone who doesn't care about monitoring, doesn't care about compliance, but it's funny how many groups are real big into their audit trail. And I always thought, if we had kind of like air traffic control, hi, I see you're flying through the area, you're about to do an EAS test. Now you are going to run it and not log it as run, but not do it, or do it, but not the other way. Of course, that as we got deeper in ES, that became less of a deal. But companies that had monitor lines, companies that would have clerks transcribe everything the station played and then say, send us your logs, we're going to look at them and compare the two, wouldn't necessarily do a knock for watching the transmitters. And I always thought, if company paranoia could force anything good technical, I thought that was it, and I was mistaken. We were going to build a big command center in either El Paso or San Antonio because we could get lots of good bilingual operator help. And it's amazing. I said, well, we're going to do your radio, we're going to do television, this will be great, you'll love it. And they not only didn't love it, it's like the one question basically was, does it have a price tag? Yes. And said, bye. I said, so goodbye, have a good day. They said, I don't remember saying good day.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to have to step away now, but I appreciate everybody's time and the questions. And, as always, we're here. Never hesitate to let us know, and you can always find us on BDR's homepage.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate
All right,
Thanks, Mark.